direction, you're going to start eating into the equity of your farm. We eliminated that problem, and we eliminated note, because now we're selling because of all these things I just said, and it was more fun. And I thought, why can't we have a little fun in this occupation? And it was a lot more fun. It was so much more interesting to me. So after 30 years of research on our farm, here are the principles I came up with for regenerative organic agriculture. First of all is diversity. We mimic nature as much as we can. The closer we can mimic nature, the closer or more success we're going to have. When you look at nature, you look out in the prairies here in Nebraska, there's no monoculture. There's no fertilizer trucks that drop by and give them a little shot every once in a while. Those prairies, and then if you go to the lake, the rivers, if you go to the seashore, if you go to the forest, it's all the same. The plants and the animals and all the microbiology is all taking and giving to that system in a way that keeps the whole thing rotating and keeps it viable and it nourishes itself. And that's the thing that we're trying to mimic with organic agriculture. So we use crop rotations to mimic nature. We avoid monoculture. We focus on soil health using green manures to build healthy soils. We feed the life in the soil, and then we let the life feed our plants. So how it works on our farm with the rotations, with only 12 to 14 inches of rain, we're only growing a cash crop every 2 years, one crop in 2 years. And most people are summer following are now chem following and leaving half the land idle. So instead of leaving it idle, well, I'll get to that in a second. The cash crops we're growing, we rotate so that we're doing fall or spring seeded crops. We're doing deep-rooted, shallow-rooted. We're doing narrow-leaf, broadleaf. All these variations that keep mixing up what is added or what is taken from the soil. And these rotations I mentioned before break up the weed, insects, and disease cycles, so that in the end we don't have to use chemicals. So there's no poisons for our land, and therefore no poisons for our people. And this is the thing that I think is really important. So the value of soil building. So every second year or two, we're using a soil building crop. Legumes mostly, yellow blossom sweet clover, alfalfa, peas, lentils sometimes. And on those crops, we are adding nitrogen, adding biomass to the material. We don't harvest them, we till them into the soil. Early or by mid-June, and then they lay and cover the ground through the season, and then in the fall or the spring, we'll work them and prepare them for seeding. So the result is no chemical fertilizers are necessary. And we feed the soil again, let the soil feed our plants. So here's our 9-year rotation that we've kind of developed over the years. I started out with just one type of soil building crop, and after 4 or 5 years and different disasters, I thought, we should have diversity in our soil building crops, just like we have in our cash crops. So now I have diversity in both, and that's worked out pretty well. We start with winter wheat, we go to fall seeded peas, which is our green manure. The next year we're looking at hulless barley or feed peas. Interseeded or underseeded with yellow blossom sweet clover, which is a biennial. It takes 2 years for that to grow up. The second year, the sweet clover grows up, and that's my most favorite one because on a good year, it'll get 5 or 6 feet tall. And when we have to heavy disc that twice to get it killed, just back to back, but it lays about a 6-inch layer of mulch right on top of the ground, and it stays all summer and protects the ground and breaks down slow, and it's my favorite. And then we go to Coruscant. Kamut Coruscant wheat, which I'll talk about in a second, and then maybe followed by peas, high oleic safflower, underseeded with alfalfa. We go to alfalfa hay, and then alfalfa grain manure plow down. And my alfalfa is really my heavy artillery. If I have Canada thistle or something, or a bad weed like that, I get a good stand of alfalfa, it'll take that out. And that's what we're trying to do. So what does organic mean? We're in a big discussion with organic and regenerative, and I like to kind of help people understand a little bit the subtle differences and maybe going on. So when Dave and I first started out together it was the Wild West in organic certification. There's very little certification going on. There was a very few state laws, I should say that to start with. California was the first in '79. Some other states followed, but some never followed. And so in those states where there's no, and the trouble is, that they are about where we were in the 1980s. There's kind of little turf wars. There's this regenerative group and that regenerative group. Each one says that they're the best or have the best ideas. There's no legal definition, so the marketing is a little bit of a challenge. Generally, they're focusing on very good things like soil health improvement, minimum till, or sometimes no best of both ideas and put them together in something we could call regenerative organic. You know, to me, it's like having two ladders coming from two different locations. One maybe from the chemical side, particularly, and then the organic side. And we're going up those ladders, improving our systems every little bit along the way until we get to the top where the two meet. And now we have the best of both worlds. And I don't care where people are on these ladders. If they're progressing and going, actually they outnumber us. And there's a lot of people kind of sitting on the sidelines that really don't know which way to go because they hear all these different ideas. Well, one of the things that we are always met with are the Monsanto types that say that we are here to feed the world. Anybody heard that? They never say that in Nebraska, right? No. We're here to feed the world, and therefore, and we can help you do that. That's the next line, of course. And everybody will starve if we go organic. That's what they say. Well, our answer to that is our job, and heard this paper from India, backed up the one from Africa, saying that peasant farmers, so we call them, using their so small farms that are feeding most of the world now, 2/3 of the world are fed by small farms in their locale. But a lot of them have steered away from their time-proven methods of rotations and soil building because of influence, I'm sorry to say, from our side, from the Western side, sometimes of trying to go toward monoculture and export and making big money, so they say they're going to do. That hasn't happened for them. But if they would return to organic principles, particularly rotations and soil building, they can increase their yields 2 or 3 times from what they're doing now generally. That's a huge opportunity. And another thing, we waste half the food in this world that we grow. In underdeveloped countries, it's wasted or lost before it gets to the store or the manufacturer because of poor storage that they don't have. In Western developed world, we waste half of it in the processing process or in our refrigerator, or what's all thrown away from the restaurants or whatever else we go and we just have such a waste. That's almost half, 40 to 50%. That's a huge low-hanging fruit for improvement, I think. Of course, we always are commented, people say that there's no future in organic. It's just a fad. It's just, a flash in the pan. Our answer to that, I think, it's the only future that makes sense. It's the only future that's possible. If you really see what's going on with the resources that we're expending on chemical agriculture. The other thing that's always my favorite, well, not my favorite, opens up a great opportunity for a rebuttal is that organic is too expensive. My answer to that is the real cost of cheap food is unaffordable. And now let me tell you why. I talked about that. So who's really paying the cost of cheap food? This country has had a cheap food and great abundance policy since World War II. And actually, they've been successful. We have abundant food, and it's cheap. But who's really paying the whole cost? So, we don't pay it at the checkout counter, right? I want you to understand that. We're not paying at the checkout counter, not the full price. Our farmers and our farm workers are paying part of this. When normal production costs exceed what they can sell their crops for, they are paying. And in my area, half of my neighbors have gone out of business because of this model. They weren't able to make it, or they tell their kids, don't even think about coming back to the farm. You'll never make a living here, and they sell out. So, who else is paying? When the farmers are going broke, half the farmers are gone in our community, that support that they lent to the small town also declined. And the businesses started to fail on Main Street because they didn't have enough to support them anymore. So half of our businesses are gone. Our population went from 1,000 when I was in high school down to 600 now. And it's typical of most small town America. Our earth is paying a big price. In the great pollutions that are surrounding the earth, we have dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico that are as big as New Jersey. How big do they have to get before we think maybe we're going in the wrong direction? Or maybe we should consider what's going on. We have wells, and Iowa is not very far from here, and I don't know what it's like here, but in Iowa, many of the wells are so, blah, blah, blah. And so we hired a big research team from Germany to come over and try to figure out what was going on. And they're the ones that stumbled onto the glyphosate in the rain. Who would have imagined? And that's where it was coming from. So that's a serious thing. We have climate change. I don't call it climate change. I call it climate chaos, because to me that's what it is. It's just chaos. But yet the amount of greenhouse gases are significantly higher now. A lot of that has come from the breakdown of organic matter in the soil in the last decades because of the way we're farming. The production of chemical fertilizers released an enormous amount of greenhouse gases also into the atmosphere. And finally, the big price is being paid by the health of our people. Imagine in this country to the fact that 60% of the people living in America now have at least one chronic disease. That's over half. 40% have two or more. How can you say, and the CDC, they have all the facts, right? They say that 60% of that problem is coming from the food that people eat, the nutrition or the kind of food. So how can you say that that's a success? That the food system we have is a success when over half the people are sick? And it doesn't matter, we debate a lot about healthcare systems. It doesn't matter what kind of healthcare, and I call it sick care, not really healthcare. But those kind of programs, it doesn't really matter what kind you have. If over half the people in the country are sick, we're going to go bust. It's going the same direction. It keeps getting worse and worse. The country is going to go bust with this kind of a system. And it's just, there's no good solutions in the end. Everybody pays. We're all paying in our taxes for trying to, the government's then using some Band-Aid approaches to try to fix some of this stuff. But there's no sign of solution. So, meanwhile, regenerative organic egg and local food has the solutions. For the farmers, we can reduce our cost of inputs, increase the value of our outputs. For our communities, we can increase financial support by a healthy farm economy that surrounds them, or increasing jobs with local processing and better wages. For the earth, we can reduce the poisons and pollutions, increase carbon sequestration by increasing organic matter in the soil, which we know that that's one of the side effects. And for the health of our people, the proper nutrition and properly nutrient-dense foods, we can significantly reduce chronic disease. And in the end of that formula, everybody wins. So that's my main pitch for that. But I'll tell you how I got onto this idea of food and health. I started with idea that food should be our medicine, medicine should be our food. That didn't start with me. That's from Hippocrates 2,500 years ago, 100 years ago. So that's not new. But this is new. Stop growing commodities focused on yield and start growing food focused on nutrition. And let me tell you real quick how I got that idea. We started going to these food shows I told you about, and my dad, and you'll have to go to chapter 5 to read about this because I haven't got time to tell you the whole story, but we ended up with a small jar of ancient wheat that supposedly came out of a tomb in Egypt. Isn't that a great story? Yeah. And my dad took that to the food show, and he was showing everybody. And at the end, I told you how my cousin I was working with in Southern California, and I had a pocket full of business cards and opportunities for a business. And my dad had one business card, and he was so excited. There was a guy in San Diego that said, "Oh, wow, that's just what I'm looking for, an ancient wheat." He was a microbiotic store that just opened up. So we went home, and this is in 1986. We went home, and we planted everything we had, which is 50 pounds. And we planted about a half acre with that. We had zero products. We had zero income. And 30 years later, we were working with 250 organic farms in Montana, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, because that's where it grew best. We had up to 100,000 acres. We had over 3,500 products, most of which were in Italy, which is a whole nother story we never could have imagined. And we were working throughout the world with a multi-million-dollar project, which was involving thousands of players. So I didn't get a big cut of that multi-million dollars, but just spread it out. Everybody was doing a little better. And that was really the goal. So let me tell you how this really evolved. And this is a huge surprise. I thought it would always be just a novelty. We'd plant a few acres and maybe we'd sell it for a little bit of an extra premium. But a friend of mine in California said, "Oh, I have an idea for this," and he made it into pasta. And it made a wonderful pasta. It was very smooth in texture, very tasty. And my dad was giving this all around to all of our friends. He gave it to this lady in Havre, about 50 miles from us, and she had all kinds of food sensitivity problems. She couldn't, and chemical problems. She couldn't walk into a house where there's formaldehyde in a new carpet, or for example, it just debilitate her. She'd just fall down, not able to move. So she was very careful what she ate, and she knew she couldn't eat wheat. But she did some kinesiology testing, some muscle testing, and she thought maybe she could try it. She ate it, and she called up the next day, and she said to my father, "What is this stuff?" She says, "When I ate it, I felt better." Oh. And I said, "Wow, well, we'll send you some more." And because my dad, when he told me what I had done, I said, "Well, why'd you give some to her for? You know she can't eat wheat." "Well, he says it's organic, isn't it?" And so now he's a couple of years, he's more converted than I am. So anyway, then our friend said, "Well, I have a sister, and she has lots of food sensitivities. Do you mind if I send some to her?" And he said, "Oh, we'll send you a box full." So he sent her a box full. After 3 or 4 weeks, we got a word back from her sister. Not only could she eat it, but after a few weeks, she was less sensitive to some of these other pollen foods that she was having trouble with, even though they weren't even wheat. They weren't even related, that I could tell. But her system was being healed in a way that she was able to be less bothered by this other stuff. And I said, "Wow, this is not just a novelty. This isn't just for fun." I said, this is really like a gift from the Lord or something that is enabling us to help people feel better. And it really opened up a whole new world for me to understand food and the purpose of food. So we decided that we took this real serious now. It's not just a novelty. We decided to register a trademark. So we thought it was from ancient Egypt, so we said, wonder what the ancient Egyptians called wheat, and they called it kamut. And since that wasn't in common language, we were able to register that as a trademark. And a trademark doesn't mean you own something. Trademark is a customer guarantee that you are selling something with certain promises. And our promises were this grain was always organically grown, is 100% ancient Coruscant is the common name for it. It's an ancient wheat, high in protein and minerals, and we didn't allow anybody who was using their trademark to tell more than they knew about it, in false advertising. If they wanted to sell a kamut cookie, it couldn't just be 2% kamut. It had to be over 50% of anything to be a kamut anything. And so those are some of the rules that we put together to try to keep it fair and try to keep it very consistent. So, but why were people able to eat this in the first place? That were having trouble. It was now my scientist kind of popped up in me again. I said, we need to do some research and find out what's going on. And I haven't got time to tell you the whole story, how that evolved. That was also a pretty tough deal to get that started. But in the end, over the last 12 or 15 years or so, we studied with human clinical trials, people who were sick with certain chronic diseases and eating both ancient grain compared to modern wheat for 6 weeks, and then having a clean-out period where they ate whatever they want, and then they switch over. So it was a crossover study, and it was double-blind. Nobody knew what they were eating. The researchers didn't even know which sack was which. We provided all the wheat for the experimentation, and at the end, every single study that we did had the same direction of results. They weren't all the same amounts, but there was never there was some positive, some negative. It was always positive. For the ancient grain, we saw in every case the anti-inflammatory properties increased 30, or was a decrease in inflammation, a decrease in that of 30 to 45%. Or increase of, I should say it the other way, anti-inflammatory properties increase 30 to 45%. You can't do that with a pill. You can't do that with chemical medicine. But with food, you could do this. There was an increase in antioxidant capacity, a decrease in cholesterol, blood sugar, and insulin resistance. For those that were diabetics, this is a big change for them. It was a food that was helping, it didn't solve all their problems, but it helped reduce their sickness and their disease. What modern wheat was helping to promote it, actually. We saw an increase in magnesium, zinc, calcium levels in the blood, and then opened up a whole new world of thinking about food as medicine. So that, I'm a wheat farmer originally, and so what have we done with wheat? It's really, I think it's pretty personal when people say they can't eat wheat, or gluten and all this stuff. That's up to almost 20% of the population now. So why is it something that has been a basis for even ancient civilizations of Rome, of Greece, of ancient Egypt, of Mesopotamia area, over all these centuries, why are so many people now all of a sudden not able to eat it? Well, there's been a couple things that we've done. One has been the goals of industrialization of food. That's cheap and abundant, I already mentioned to you. So there's a big returns coming to a few. It's a very extractive type of program. And so they've, in the breeding programs, made sure that they're increasing the yields. And first of all, they want to increase the yields for the farmer. So you see the size, the height of ancient wheats or heirloom wheats are extremely tall. And now they've gone clear down to semi-dwarf wheats now, that in a good year are just right, but in a bad year, they're hard to cut for us. Anyway, we're on the ground. But what they've done with that is increase the yields. They've bred also those plants so that they would respond more to chemical fertilizers, so that also gave another kit to increase yields. And so the whole idea is more inputs and more yields. So the bakers, they wanted the same thing. They wanted high volumes too. Now see those breads at the bottom? Those are all made with the same amount of wheat. But the difference is the gluten structure and the molecules of the gluten, how they've bred them and selected for gluten that's stronger, can hold more air. So that bread rises because yeast is breaking down, well, sugars in this case, and I'll tell you a little bit more on that in a second, and releasing carbon dioxide, one of the things that releases, and that causes the bread to rise. So the more air that you have in the bread, you see the big one on your, yeah. That's because of there's air in that. So imagine if you're a baker and you can sell air for the price of bread. You see, that was of great interest, and so that was a big demand. Now what happened was all kinds of unexpected, unintentional consequences. So we have the more complex gluten meant that a lot of people, or some people at least, couldn't digest that in the same way. They also had what's known as fast-rising yeast now. Fast-rising yeast acts so fast that it only has time to digest the sugar they add to the bread, in the commercial bakers I'm talking about, to rise the bread, and then they can get ready for the next batch. It's very quick. If you compare that to sourdough, for example, that is fermenting with yeast and bacteria over longer periods of time, sometimes up to 40 hours. If you ferment over up to 40 hours, almost nobody does this, but if you did, you would be destroying or breaking down 90% of the gluten is broken down into simpler compounds. When you pre-digest the bread, if you can call it that, under fermentation, when you eat that, it's already half done. The digestion is already half done, you might say. So the gluten is being broken down, the starch is being broken down, and it's very easy on your system to finish the job. Some people are affected with glyphosate residues, and they affect them in the same way that the problems with gluten affect some people. So glyphosate works. It's very interesting how this works. It works on interrupting a certain metabolic pathway that is found in all plants. And it's making a very essential amino acid. And if it can't make that, the plant dies. Well, guess what? Most bacteria also have this same pathway. And if they can't make it, they die. But mammalian cells, human cells, are not affected. They have to have that amino acid taken in and eaten. So it's not essential to them. They get it through their food. So if they are affected with glyphosate, they don't die. But guess where there's bacteria living in your system that outnumbers the number of cells in your body, human cells. There's more bacteria in your gut than there are human cells in your body. No. And if you start messing with those, you're going to have all sorts of weird things go on. And that's what's happened to a lot of people. And they're not just one thing, it's different things for different people. So anyway, that's part of the problem. Okay, let me move on here. So, let me tell you one more story. And then I got to brush through a couple of these things. I was at a food show one time with my wife. That's my wife there. She didn't go with me too often, but it was fun when she did go. And a lady came up to me just right out of the blue. She shook my hand just really vigorously, and she looked right into my eyes, and she said, "Thank you for growing food for my family." And I thought, wow. I never heard such a thing before. As a wheat farmer, we don't get to go to farmers markets and have people say, "Oh, I love this, whatever it is. Thank you very much." We take our wheat to the elevator. Anybody ever taken a load to the elevator and had anybody say thank you? No. They are taking samples so that they can figure out how to dock you with some kind of a problem that they can see with too many weeds or too many stones or too much this or that or whatever. Thank you, I've never heard of such a thing. And it just set me back. And when I went home, I tell you, from that day on, we never grew another commodity on our farm ever again. The only thing we grew on our farm was food, good food, food that nourished people, food that gave health and vitality, people that help youngsters grow up strong and healthy, and help elderly people, enjoy their life as long as possible. That's what we do. And so this whole commodity mentality, some of my neighbors think if they're only growing commodities, they play a commodity market, everything's commodity this, commodity that. They don't even think about growing food. And so that's a really, I think that's a problem. So let's see. I think we should reconnect food and community. You already heard me say most of that. Let's irrigate less and capture more of the rain that falls on our farm. If our soil is really in good shape, we can do that. And then we can use more of what comes to us naturally. Let me tell you just a little bit about irrigation. And I'm trying to grow now vegetables. We don't have any irrigation possibilities at our place. The water is too saline. We can't dig enough to get to aquifers that could be otherwise. So, but the homesteaders did it, so why can't we do it? So I'll show you real quick what some of the things we've been trying to do. Here's the reason why we need to think about, we're running out of water, folks. In California, we can't look at California as our breadbasket anymore. If they run short of water between the farms and the cities, who do you think is going to win that discussion, battle? And we need to be growing a little bit more of our food closer by. I mean, with the war in Ukraine, 60% of these sunflowers are coming from Ukraine. That was really a good idea. Probably because they could get them a little bit cheaper. We can grow sunflowers here, but everything is based on cheap and making money. So we need to have a different idea about that. So let me show you some of the things we've been able to grow. Potatoes, we grow winter squash, summer squash, melons, onions, garlic, sweet corn, which I hesitate to show this in Iowa, of course. But here's our Indian corn. I mean, it's not even shoulder high for me. But we don't eat what's above that anyway. We're eating the cobs. The trick is, real quick, what I found is if I can reduce my plant population, I give them 3 times more space than normal, what you normally do if you're irrigating, and they go find the water. We have about 1/3 of the rain as Iowa does, and so I have 1/3 of the plants per acre, and each plant produces just about the same amount per plant, but we have a lot of land, and it's not as expensive as Iowa, and so we can do that. The other thing we can look at is different crops. Here's my apples in an orchard that you say, they tell us we can't grow in Montana. Here's sour cherries and grapes, and we're trying to make a new breakfast drink with sour cherry juice and apple juice. It's fantastic. It's high in antioxidants and vitamin C, all the stuff that orange juice has, and there's not an orange tree within 1,000 miles of Montana. Why are we drinking that every day? And let's grow our own. You can do that here. So then we can talk about different businesses. This is one of my businesses. I started on our farm as a Ohio Lake Sapphire Oil Crushing Facility. We make oil. And our main customers in Montana State University and the University of Montana, and we're able to bring some of that used oil back, filter it, and dewater it, and put it in my tractor. I can sell it twice. Imagine if you can sell your crops twice, this really helps the bottom line. And I think, why do we get so balled up in this fight over food versus fuel when we're talking about land use if we could use both for the same? First is food in the case of oils, and then second is fuel. And we have, well, anyway, that's just the idea. The second idea I had was making a snack food. That was actually my first idea, if you read the story in the book. And we take our ancient grain, and I cook it in the safflower oil, and add a little salt. And I've got a little bag of it here. There's more people than I thought there was going to be, so I don't have one for each of you, but if you share, I'll dump it out on the table out at the registration desk where the books will be, and you can try some. Anyway, now we're imagine this, folks. Now, instead of by the truckload, we're selling our grain by the ounce, you see. So this is also really, really, really helping. Now, I haven't got time to go through the whole thing of this, but we've been able to add to our little town 33 people coming into our town for these little jobs we've created. People always say, oh, organic is more work. It's not more work, it's more job potential. It's more job opportunities. And this is what keeps the economy going. So anyway, that's 5.5% of the population we've been able to increase in Big Sandy. That's not huge, but it's going in the right direction. And imagine if we repeated that all over the state, how much, and all over Nebraska, and all over the West, and the small towns everywhere, how much of that good would be done. Okay, I got 2 minutes to wind up. So let me tell you what I'm doing for retirement. I had a retirement party in December. My wife said, okay, you're going to have a retirement party, you're going to have to retire. I said, okay, I sold all my businesses. And so now let me show you what I'm doing for fun. I built a subterranean greenhouse for the last 2 years. And we heat it with geothermal. Whoops, I skipped that too quick. These tubes go out 10 feet under the ground, out 300 feet, and they bring in 50-degree air year-round. It's the same temperature. And it heats in the winter and cools in the summer. We put a top over it from the folks here in Nebraska, the greenhouse and snow folks. I built cement walls so I could get more room in mine. There's what it looks like, kind of finished. The north wall has tin and insulation on the inside, and then I put thick insulation board around the cement. I have 2 rooms. I have a peach room that will be allowed to freeze. Haven't planned that yet. And it has 3 feet of topsoil and compost mixed half and half in it. And then I have my orange room, so now there is an orange within 1,000 miles away. But not very many, you see. But just for fun. So I'm trying to grow all my own food. I'm up to about 85% of what I eat now is what I grow on my farm. And of course, I love citrus, and that wasn't really one of the choices, but now it is. So we got some 12 citrus trees can go in there, 6 stone fruit trees in the other room, and we're just getting started, and it's a lot of fun. And the last thing I want to do is create an organic research center on our farm, take 700 acres out of the middle of our farm. I've got 5 kids. Nobody's showing up at the door, the farm, you see. And there's some things that you can't tell your kids what to do. They have to find their own way back if they're coming back, and they're welcome if they do. But if they don't want to, then, I'm not giving it to them or making them do it. So we're going to take 700 acres and study research of how we can better solve some of the challenges of organic regenerative agriculture, and also education, how we can teach people how to garden, how to grow their own food, how to do an orchard, how to prune, how to take a turnip out of your garden and what to do with it and get it on your table. So how to cook out of your garden, and then also we want to have how to preserve stuff, how to can, how to ferment, how to freeze, all that stuff. And then we want to have a health component, because this whole thing is one big whole, right? And have a health practitioner on staff that could not only tell us, or not focus on chronic disease, but not through pills from the pharmacy, but food from the farm. Good food, healthy food. And that's our goal. So, in conclusion, let me just dream a little, really, really quick. So one of our farmers were paid by quality, by quality, pounds per nutrition, I mentioned before, and can make a decent living and pay good wages out of their return for the food that they grew. One of our foods were labeled to show nutritional value, like an inflammatory index. So people knew what the value they were buying in the store. That could drive the things in the direction we want to go, instead of just, pushing cheap food all the time. I wonder if we pay a little more for good food, including fair wages, and a lot less for sick care, because we weren't so sick. Instead of enriching big pharma, expensive pills, I wonder if we were to, as I mentioned, cure ourselves with good food. Farmers grew more of their inputs and paid less to big chemical companies. All this could be accomplished with regenerative organic ag. Everybody wins. This is the goal. Everybody wins. So, all right, gave you that pitch. Want to change the world? Okay, this is my last slide. Want to change the world? Oh, we got 2 minutes? 1 minute? 1 minute. Okay, right. Yeah. Okay.
Still 2 minutes.
Here's what I want to tell you. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Start with you. So, either one bite or one field at a time. If you're a shopper or eater, put one more item of organic food in your cart every time you go to shop. Support your local organic restaurants if you're going to go out to eat. Go to one of those. If you're on a low budget, not everybody can pay the top dollar, right? Grow it yourself. Help someone with a big garden, share a little. Help someone with a small farm and share a little of theirs. Buy in bulk. Buy on process. Cook, can, freeze with friends and family a couple times a month. That would supply your food. cut your food bill in half by not wasting anything. Use it all. Don't eat out. Make cooking a part of your social life and your date night and your recreation activities. Make it fun. Make it part of your life. If you're a gardener, well, make your garden a little more organic every year. Grow a little more of your own food every year. Even if it's just a couple pots on the windowsill, I don't care. Just, it's a direction. If you're a farmer, convert one more of your field to organic a year. If you've already done that, help your neighbors do the same thing, or someone down the road. You want to have change in government policy? Well, then go to Washington, or at least write or call once in a while. It's time that we've had as much money allocated for research as we are eating. So 6% of what we eat now is organic. Why can't 6% of the research be organic? Make chemical companies liable for drift and non-point source contamination. Divert government support for prescription pills to high nutrition dense food. How about developing a way to test and label food for nutritional density? Divert carbon capture to paying farmers for carbon sequestration. Supporting more renewable fuels and less waste products, and so on and so on. So I'm just out of time, but let me show you what can happen. In the last 35 years, we've gone from 0 to about 6% of our food is organic. At the current rate of growth, which is about, it's in double digits this year, and last year because of the COVID thing, but it's been averaging around 8%. 35 more years, it could be 100%. So don't give up. Let's finish the job. So, eat organic, grow organic, be wise, be well, be thankful, and be kind. So, thank you very much. We don't have questions now, but I'll be around the rest of the day if you want to corner me.